All right, so let me switch over and talk a little bit about Azure Incubations. I've got an Azure Incubations team that formed, again, about 9 years ago, and it formed accidentally. I had a couple of technical assistants that we were trying to think about the future of cloud-native computing. Well, actually, before even thinking about that, one of them came up with this idea. He said, you know, what Kubernetes is missing is an autoscaler that's really flexible, where you can have autoscaling rules based on any kinds of metrics. And I said, that's really cool. Let's go and build that out. So he built it out with the other technical assistant, and it's called Kubernetes Event-Driven Autoscaler. How many people have heard of that? So yeah, a few of you, some fans, woot. So Kata came out of that team, and Kata became we submitted that to CNCF. It graduated in 2023 to become a graduated CNCF project. But then we're thinking about the future of cloud-native computing. They came up with this idea that we eventually fleshed out into what's now called DAPR, the Distributed Application Runtime. I'm really thrilled because we submitted that to CNCF as an incubating project in 2019, 5 years ago almost exactly, and last week it graduated. So now this is a graduated CNCF project. Graduation means it's a mature project, maturely governed, lots of people use it, lots of enthusiasm and activity with it, and I think it's like the 6th most active project in CNCF. Now, we've contributed some more. Copacetic, it's a container patching application or project. That's also we contributed to CNCF, and we've deployed this inside of Azure now, inside of Azure Container Registry. And for Microsoft itself, we're patching literally millions of containers a month using our Copa technology we developed and incubated. But I'm going to talk about a couple new ones today. One is called Project Radius, and one is called Drassy. Now, Project Radius, let's talk about that one first. So one of the things, talking to customers, is that as Kubernetes took off, a lot of them focused their cloud-native strategies on top of Kubernetes. Kubernetes, it's not really a serverless infrastructure. It's a control plane. It's a separate control plane from cloud control planes. And the way that you deploy applications to it has you merge the application with the infrastructure. A lot of people find it so complicated that what we see as enterprises building abstractions on top or templates that they give out to their development teams. We want to make it easier for developers and architects to craft those applications, not have to worry about infrastructure, and yet let a platform engineering team figure out how to implement security and compliance and cost management. And so that's what Radius is aimed at. Radius lets you define an application of resources that connect with each other. And that application you can make cloud portable, or you can tie it to particular resources in a cloud or a Kubernetes, and then hand that off to a platform engineering team if that's the way the organization's structured. And that platform engineering team creates what are called environments for that application to land on. Those environments have what are called recipes that bind resources to the infrastructure. And the recipes are where the platform engineering team can implement things like security. This database needs to have private link on it. This front door needs to be inside of this virtual network. It also is where they can do cost management as well, and they can do right sizing for the application. What you get out of Radius when you start to use it is you get that collaboration between the development team and the platform engineering team. You get these recipes that can be reused and customized. You get an application graph because you can see all the resources in your app and how they relate to each other. And then you also get cloud portability or cloud neutrality if you want it. So just to give you a little idea of how this looks in practice, this application here, Internet Gateway, front-end container, back-end container, the front end talks to a Redis cache for caching, and the back end talks to a Mongo database. You define this application. This is basically a cloud portable application because we're using open source components where you can find open source services, managed services on all the clouds. And you can also bring it yourself with the container. So you want to deploy this on premises, you deploy it onto a Kubernetes cluster, and you specify the containers in your recipe to launch the Redis cache or the Mongo database. And you do that however you want it configured with your recipe. You want to take and deploy that same application to Azure, and you have recipes for the Azure landing zone, the Azure environment, that connect it to Azure versions of those services. And then finally, you want to deploy it to AWS, you've got an AWS recipe. But where Radius is going is more than just Kubernetes. I want to tie it back to ACI and our view that the future is serverless. And that's what Radius is going to enable, because it will let you take the same application and deploy it to Kubernetes or deploy it to a serverless infrastructure. And the first infrastructure we're targeting is ACI and ACI N groups. So the Incubations team worked closely with the N groups team to make sure it would support ACI. And what we've got here, a ratified application, an environment specified for it in Azure that's container instances. And then when you deploy it, you get some resource groups with those resources deployed. But you can take that same application and deploy it to Kubernetes. In fact, that's what I'm going to show you right now. This application that I'm going to show you is the Finos Trader X application. So Finos is an organization, consortium of banks that have gotten together to define standards for the banks and drive forward cloud-native innovation and security compliance for the banking community. They've got reference applications. This one's called Finos, and that's actually a picture from there, the Trader X docs, showing this application that consists of representative microservices in a financial application. You can see there's 7 or 8 of them. So we've ratified this application, meaning we've defined this. We've defined this in Radius. So let's go take a look at that Radius definition. So this is the app definition there we're taking a look at. And then we've got 2 environments, the ACI environment and an AKS environment for a Kubernetes service where we can launch it onto a Kubernetes cluster. You can see on the right side it's kind Kubernetes, on the left ACI, and then we're going to launch both of them using rad deploy, specify the environment that they're targeted at. The -W specifies the target environment that we have recipes set up for in Radius to do the appropriate creation of that infrastructure. And then now you can see both applications have deployed. We can see the resources that were created in Radius. We can take a look at the app graph and see the connections between the front end talking to the database, or the web app talking to the database. And the same thing is what you see on the AKS side. They look exactly the same, but one is running on ACI and one is running in Kubernetes AKS pods. And now here's the Azure resources for the ACI version, and you can see now the container instances there on the right side and the N groups there on the right side. So what we've just done is had this application, fairly complicated, not web plus database, but microservice-based, real app, ratified it. And by the way, it took 1 day to ratify that app, converting the Helm charts and Kubernetes manifests to Radius, and then got this running on 2 infrastructures,